All right, let's kick things off. Good evening, everyone. My name is Oliver Maruda from the Whiskey List, and thanks to all of you for joining in one of our another virtual tastings. We do these as often as possible, about one a week, and we always like to focus with an Aussie distiller, at least one or two a month. We love what the Aussie whiskey scene is growing, and tonight, Crafty, this is I think your third tasting with us, right?
I think it would be, mate. We've been doing it for a while now, so yeah.
Yeah, welcome. So anyone who's joined Crafty's tasting before, you know what you're in for. Those who haven't met Crafty, then you're in for something special tonight. So without I'll in a second, just some quick housekeeping. So don't drink and drive. There's some high ABV whiskies here. I can see everyone's safe at home, but always got to put that safety message out. Feel free to add water to your whiskey. Recommend you grab that tasting lineup, and if you got 6-7 glasses, actually pour all your whiskies out and let them breathe. Whiskies number 2 and 3, the two sheds and the Billie Miles, we're actually going to drink them together. So if you can at least get 2 glasses now, so we can do a nice side by side with them. We record all these tastings, we share it to our YouTube afterwards, and I send out the link. At the end of the tasting, we have these whiskies in various quantities available to buy. So I'll share the link and a little 10% off discount for everyone as well as a special thank you for tonight to look forward to. What else? And last thing, questions, comments. We love your engagement, your feedback. Just put your tasting notes or any questions you have to Crafty, throw it into the chat. We'll get a nice engaged session. Crafty's incredibly transparent. You ask him anything, what color his dog is, and he'll tell you everything. So, without further ado, welcome Crafty, mate. Welcome back.
Thanks, Ollie, mate. It's always a pleasure to do one of these sessions. As you know, I love telling the story of what we're doing, but not just what we're doing, what's happening in Australia. Because I'm very, very involved in the Australian scene, and it's an exciting, dynamic scene. But first things first, we need a drink.
We do.
So let's kick it off. The first one we're going to taste is something a little bit different. It's the Capertee. So have you all identified the Capertee? And if you want to pour yourself a drink, and we'll get going on the Capertee, and then I'll talk a little bit about me and my shed and what I'm doing and where I'm going. So is everyone all ready? Got a drink? Everyone happy?
Yeah, we're ready.
Right. Okay. So what I say to people is I have one job and one job only, and that is to take people to their happy place. Right. And when you think about that, it's quite a profound statement, but we're all human beings. We all love stories. We all love experiences. And whiskey is the one spirit which it's just a drink of conversation. It's a drink of experiences. You can have the shittiest whiskey in the world with your mates and have a fantastic experience, where you can have the best whiskey in the world. So hopefully you're going to enjoy these whiskies. There's an array of whiskies, and I'll walk through them and explain each step. But first things first, for those that don't know, this is the Capertee. This is part of a series which I call the Capertee, which is a gin, a vodka, and a whiskey. And the idea behind the Capertee is it's really our tourist bottle, our market bottle. It's showcasing what we're doing, and it's at an easy, approachable ABV. Generally, we're at 46, 47%. That's what I'm sort of targeting. The other whiskies are a lot stronger. I tend to strike between 52 and 56. That seems to be what I believe is the optimum range for our whiskies. But what is the Capertee? Well, the first thing is, on the bottle, you'll notice it ain't a single malt. It's a whiskey. But what constitutes a single malt? 100% barley? Tick. That is 100% barley. Made at a single distillery? Tick. That's made at a single distillery. So it's a single malt. It's not. And the reason why is because there's a very small percentage of distilled beer in there. So I got some overcarbonated stout, and for shits and giggles, I decided to distill it and see what distilled beer is like, which is a category. Some people say whiskey.
I was going to say Whiskey.
Whiskey, yeah, Whiskey, exactly right, yeah. And there's a lot of reasons why you wouldn't distill beer. It has a lot of hops generally. Hop oils can be problematic in distilling, but yeah, I did it, and I loved the taste, and I put it in a barrel, and I forgot about it. And then when I was making the Capertee, it wasn't what I wanted. It was lacking a sweetness, a fruitiness. So I started playing around on the bench with the Capertee and introduced a very small percentage of the hopped beer into it. So it's a zingy little number. It's definitely got some hoppy characteristics, quite fruity, and it's actually very, very popular as far as people at markets and cellar and that, because they come and try it and they go, it's a whiskey, and this thing is a flavor bomb. It's got a lot going on. It's got a lot of oils, as you can probably see in the glass. It coats your mouth. It gives you a long aftertaste, which is something personally I put a lot of credence in. You need to have big aromatics and big length of flavor. They're the bookends of making a good whiskey. If you don't have that, you're on a hiding to nothing, in my opinion. So yeah, this is the Capertee. What's the barrel? Wow, good question, someone asked. So I believe. It is an ex-Lark whiskey cask that went to Stone Dog Meadery, who made a cider and then had a crack at making a stout and put the stout in for a short period of time. I got it, and I got it because it was an intriguing cask. I believe in layering up flavors from different things. It adds complexity and depth. And so I got it. My mash bill, or my grain recipe, which is the fundamental core of the Craft Works flavour approach, a style called I Am. 4 malts, and that went in there. And about 3.5 years, I think, from memory, and crafted the Capertee. So enjoy.
Whilst everyone's tasting it, a few comments coming in. So Jan and both actually Michael have hinted tastes like chocolate and roasted coffee beans on the palate. So that's one of your particular grains in your 4 malts there. That's the base, right? That's where that flavour's coming from.
Very much so. So it's my approach to making whiskey is making a number of different recipes, and I've got 3 recipes. This one is called the I Am profile, and it's loosely based on a stout beer recipe many years ago when I started distilling in 2017. So it's less of a Scotch style whiskey in the sense of it's just a single barley. This is using four types of barley. Some are roasted to different levels, and one of the barleys is actually referenced chocolate malt. So if you drink a porter or a stout beer or a black beer, it has quite a sizable percentage of chocolate malt in there. So yes, that is imparting the flavor of chocolate or coffee or cocoa, those sort of notes that are getting picked up.
Yeah, you got a comment from Dave saying he definitely agrees, big coffee notes in there. So I think that's we've had a bit of a caffeine hit unnecessarily, but in a good way to kick things off.
So yeah, any other questions on the Capertee? Ask any question. There's no such thing as a silly question. I'm learning every single day. I'm in this industry, and I love it when I ask a dumb question, because it just leads me to another question.
Well, one of my favorite things in Crafty, we've known each other for many years, is Crafty's, you head over the Blue Mountains. So Sydney, Blue Mountains past the Three Sisters down the hill to Lithgow on your way to Mudgee. And there's this tiny ex-mining town, used to have a massive population. There's still a steam train that occasionally rolls through. It's called Capertee. And it actually has a world record claim in the region, even bigger than the Americans. Not just the best whiskey in the region, but the landscape as well. And that's the picture in the bottle. Well, tell us a little bit about the area.
Right. So Capertee, we are right on the edge of the Capertee Valley. So we're basically the dividing range. And it was recorded as the widest canyon in the world. And it is absolutely spectacular. When you go down into the valley, the light changes depending on the time of the day, and it is absolutely stunning. And if you can ever get a chance to jump in a helicopter and go out through the Capertee Valley, it is absolutely world class. And I've had people come here who've visited the Grand Canyon and gone, this thing is stunning. Anyway, it's the widest. Now, Google challenged that a few years ago. So it's now apparently the second widest canyon in the world, but the locals will still argue it's the widest. And we even have a road sign that still says it's the widest. So Google, sorry, you're not convincing everybody.
I don't think they're going to come out with a measuring stick or a tape measure and figure it out.
No, and it's the widest. So I'm situated about 820 meters above sea level. My distillery it gets down to about -5 in winter, and it gets up to sort of the high 30s, but generally doesn't peak above that. Within a day, like right now, it's 5 degrees, 6 degrees in the morning, getting up to about 18, and then at 4 o'clock it drops. So we had a lot of temperature variation, and I'm in a tin shed, half the shed insulated, half not. But what we also get, and you'll hear this, some distillers talk about it, is barometric pressure. So we had a lot of storm fronts that roll through, and these storm fronts, low pressure systems, put a lot of pressure on the barrels. And I kid you not, the barrels squeak and groan, you see it. So what you're actually witnessing is the spirit moving intensely into the wood and out of the wood. And so I believe we get big extractive power out of our barrels due to climate, but barometric pressure is the big secret in the industry.
It's pretty cool. If you ever do get to visit the shed on the other side of where Crafty's laptop is the barrels just against the wall. So that is pretty much the space you're in. You got the still in the back corner there, which is sunflower number 1, and then you got the barrels on the other side. So
I don't know if you can see, probably can't.
There you go. Yep, a little bit down.
Bit down.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, and over there, barrels there, barrels all over the place. Very small shed, 120 square meter shed, and I started with a 60 square meter shed, and that was back in 2017.
At least you're growing, mate, doubling each time as you go. You'll be. Shall we pour the 2 sheds and the Billie Miles together whilst you answer this question? So yeah, next 2 whiskies, if you get a chance, side by side, 2 sheds and Billie Miles. So the question for you, Crafty, is: would the stout being distilled and used have an influence on the flavour?
Absolutely, absolutely. It came across. It was a very chocolatey new make spirit, and tasty. Really hoppy though, really hoppy. And at the time, I thought to myself, "Whoa, okay, there are challenges in distilling beer." The hops sort of died down over time, and it's tasty. Actually, just on that, an interesting comment, a side comment about the Australian industry. So during COVID, a lot of brewers had keg beer, and there was no bars and there was no restaurants, so they had no outlet for their beer. And a number of distillers decided to grab it and distill it. So you're going to start to see more and more hopped whiskey come out on the market. Cora did a release called Our Saviour, which is absolutely stunning. It's not something you drink all the time, hopped whiskey, but it's very, very interesting stuff.
Backwoods did one as well with their local brewery, helped them out.
Did.
Yeah,
Yep.
so they've released both the beer version, which is the watered down whiskey, and a high strength whiskey that tastes like beer. So it's a bit of a frame of mind, point of a reference, but it's interesting innovation. And they don't label it a single malt whiskey. They say beer ski on it, just to make sure you're very well aware it's not a single malt or a rye that they've bottled. So it's nice that you get that transparency.
It's also a testament to the level of collaboration that's going on in our industry. There is a lot of collaboration, winemakers and distillers, brewers and distillers. It's really quite exciting.
There you go, Cape Byron. Yeah, they just launched one with their local brewery up in the Cape there, or no, Garage Project in New Zealand, I think I read. But
yeah,
I can't remember. And Dave says there's a distillery in the States that does hopped whiskey as well.
Yeah, got a huge following. Red something, I think, from memory. I could be wrong. 42 or Red 42 or something like that. Yeah, really interesting. I'm very interested in what's going on in America. There's a lot of innovation. A lot of distillers in America have actually come from brewing background. So they bring all their knowledge of grains and recipes and that into distillation. That's super exciting.
So tell us about these two, apart from having a very similar ABV, 54.9 and 54.4. What's Two Sheds and Billie Miles about?
Okay, so what you're drinking, but I'm not, and I'm about to, we'll start with, bear with me. Where is it? Two Sheds. Okay, so I started in 2015 as an independent bottler. Now, for those that don't know what an independent bottler is, an Australian independent bottler is you basically go to a distillery in a very friendly, collaborative way, and you say, can I buy some raw spirit, new make spirit off you? I will take it away. I will put it into barrels that you won't use. I will mature it in my location, and I will make a whiskey completely different to you. And full transparency, right? To the point, if they want their name on the bottle to say where the spirit come from, you do that. If they don't, that's fine. So yeah, 2015. So this is Two Sheds to start with. Just nose it for now. And then I'll get you to nose Billie Miles. So why am I saying taste these two together? It's because this is a very, very unique experience. And I'll digress for a second. So Scotch-centric marketing, and I'm not bagging Scotch. I love Scotch, but Scotch-centric marketing is very much built on the premise that 80% of the flavor comes from the barrel, right? And you go, yeah, okay, a huge contribution of flavor definitely comes from the barrel. But what about the raw spirit? What about the barley that's gone into the raw spirit? Surely that has contribution. And the Scottish position on mass is the further you go down the manufacturing process, the least impact it has on flavor. So what's first? Barley. Barley doesn't have much flavor, right? No. Barley has huge contribution of flavor if you let it, if you want it to. It's not all about the barrel. And so this is a really good example of that. So what you've got is Two Sheds, is Tin Shed Distillery in South Australia, in Adelaide. So Ian Smith and Vic Orlo, and their raw spirit. Billie Miles is Fleurieu Distillery on the Fleurieu Peninsula. So that's Gareth and Angela, and they're coastal. So they're about probably 2 hours apart, but they're in South Australia. They're basically using the same approach from a barley perspective to make their whiskey, right? So I took that. I got 4 barrels made at exactly the same time. And the 4 barrels were ex-Shiraz wine cask seasoned with Oloroso Spanish sherry for a year, pull it out and toast it and heavy char it. So for those that want to understand a bit more what that means, toasting is like cooking. baking, and whereas charring is like barbecuing. That's what you're doing to the wood, and you get different elements, different flavor compounds generated. That's all good. I filled 4 barrels the same time, right? Those 4 barrels came to my shed. They sat on my shelf side by side for 5 and a bit years, right? And I released them at the same time at approximately the same ABV, which is 54, 55. And if you subscribe to the theory that the barrel is 80% of the flavor, then these should taste absolutely identical. You taste them, you nose them, right? Nose them, take a note of the texture in the glass, take a note of the texture in your mouth, take a note of the length, take a note of the first things that you're tasting on each of them. And I'd suggest that they are vastly different whiskies. So that's a side-by-side comparison. That is a very, very rare opportunity. And was it an experiment? No, it's just the way it worked out.
And you matured both of these whiskies in your New South Wales bond store, yeah?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And, over the years, I've nurtured them. I've decided I was going to pull one, then I decided not to. And when I released it, it was like, it's actually part of a series called the Ages series. So the Ages series is the last of my independent bottling. So I finished independent bottling actually this month. Oh yeah, this month. And it's the oldest whiskey that I've got in the shed. So it's between 5 and 6 years old. And that's why I call it the Ages series. So we have 2 sheds, Billie Miles, Rebel, and 5x5, which hasn't officially been released yet.
But
what do you think?
We can pre-order it tonight.
Yes, you can pre-order it tonight. And that's not available. It's because I haven't bottled it yet.
He's been very busy traveling and now he's got to get back into the shed to do some bottling and distilling. Tom asked the question, is the Billie is actually a lot drier? Sorry, it was a bit of a comment. So there's a bit of side by side. What else do people at home think? Hands up if you prefer the first one or 2 sheds. Okay, and hands up if you prefer the Billie. All right, I think the Billie has edged just out.
I'll tell you what my take on it is. So I've done a number of whiskey shows, cellar door markets, et cetera. And what I find, it's probably almost a 2-to-1 ratio, 2 to Billie, 1 to 2 sheds. However, seasoned whiskey drinkers go for 2 sheds, right? And people who don't drink whiskey a lot go for Billie. That's how I would describe it. 2 great whiskies, 2 awesome Australian, 2 awesome distilleries. I mean, tin Shed's been around for a long time. Smitty and Vic are making amazing stuff. And Gareth and Angela, when we did this, they were getting traction. They were just starting to get traction, and now they're rock gods on the Australian whiskey scene. And by the way, they've all tasted it, and they've all had a bottle of the product, and they're all going, yeah, and totally different to theirs.
Well, I like the fact that you can return the product to them and let them try it as a bit of an experiment, because they know their own bread and butter, they know their profile, their barrel program, everything. So to try something that they originally made but then finished, outside of their control in order to try where their spirit could go as well, I think is a bit of a fun way for them to understand, where you can push the boundaries of their flavors.
100%. It's and it's exciting. Independent bottling is where I learned what I'm doing. And IB is an exciting thing because you get to do different things than the actual distillery would do. Like you want to release at a higher ABV, go for it. You want to release at a lower ABV. You want to go into a different sort of barrel. You want to play around with the toast and char. You want to play around with the maturation time. There's so many levers you can pull differently to where the spirit actually came from. And I look forward to the day, and I've sort of done it at a minor scale, but I look forward to the day where someone gets my spirit and they go off and they IB it and they make something completely different to me. To me, that's really exciting.
Yeah, it's a really cool prospect. Michael says chalk and cheese between the two, but 2 sheets is a lot fresher. And as Tom suggested, the Miles is drier on the finish for him. So there you go.
I find personally, 2 sheds has got a bit of almost like a minty eucalypt thing going on. It's a bit more savory, for want of a better word. Whereas Billie it's more, it's mouthfeel, it's more creamy, definitely lots of toffee going on and that sort of thing. The interesting thing with Billie is Flurio's known for salted caramel. That's their signature flavor profile. And I had a cup of coffee one day and then I had a taste of Billie, and man, could I pick the salt. It was just there, but I couldn't pick it any other time. Is anyone getting a salty note on Billie Miles?
I'm getting a little bit of savory. There might be more like salt used in a recipe or in a dessert rather than salt itself.
Yeah, exactly, like a salted creme brulee or something like that. Just one thing too, I should point out. So an area which I've explored, I put a lot of emphasis in design on bottles. So if you look at 2 sheds, it's a really, really cool design. That is what's called AI text to art generation. So that's me sitting down, giving text commands and AI generating art. That took me about 10 hours to do. It's crazy. It's fantastic. It's exciting. And then you play with it and you do filters and all sorts of things. But it's like teaching a child and they get bored. And so you'll be working on an image, you'll be getting it close to what you want, and all of a sudden it'll just throw the toys out the cot and it's no good. So it's fun and I love it. And if I look at, bear with me, if I look at Billie, trying to find a Billie, same thing. So why is it called Billie Miles? It's called Billie Miles because Flurio back in the day used to fill 2 casks at a time, and they'd name their casks. So it was Bonnie and Clyde, Brad and Angelina, and they'd put them aside in pairs, but not Brad and Angelina. And I love the concept. So I love the concept of Billie Miles, Billie Holiday and Miles Davis. And I thought, how cool would that be if they could ever perform together? And the irony is, with all the artwork and that, with AI technology and how it's moving so quickly, it will not be long before there'll be video to text, and you'll be able to say, I want to see super realism, Billie Holiday and Miles Davis performing together. That'll be a mind blow.
Very cool. Tom has suggested next is AI whiskey as well.
That's actually a thing. That is actually a thing. I read an article about it. There is, not whiskey, beer, AI beer. So basically AI has come up with a recipe for a great beer and they made it and went, ooh, that's good.
It wouldn't take long. Like I know they've got the old ledgers, but imagine you could pop into one of Diageo's old warehouses and digitally transcribe all those handwritten ledgers and then match it to all global reviews on Whiskey Base at Whiskey Fun and which whiskies have performed, which IBs have picked a great cask versus the OBs, and then get the AI to come up with a perfect whiskey recipe that always performs 99 out of 100, and it would probably get it right. I don't think it'd be that far off.
Yeah, no, it's a tool. It's a tool for the future. definitely. Where's my call? Right, so we've tasted Billie Miles, and we've tasted Two Sheds, and you've tasted Capertee. So what's the next one on it? 5Y.
5Y5. Your names are getting more ambiguous, mate.
Why is it called?
I was calling this whiskey system because that's the coding acronym for system. So
Is it really?
yeah.
I didn't know that. 5Y5. So 5Y5. What is 5Y5? 5Y5 is it's 5. That's why it's 5. And it almost became 6Y6, but it's just shy of 6Y6. So it's called 5Y5. It's now on the bottle, it's not, the distillery is not disclosed because they didn't want to put it on the bottle. But I can tell you that it's New South Wales, it's Aisling, Mark Burns, Michelle Burns, fantastic still makers, fantastic distillery. So, and the imagery on it is walking into the sunset, which is representative of me and my final independent bottling, which is quite cool, very emotional for me too. It's my first release called Just Derek was very emotional because it related to a friend who passed away who influenced me, and I do what I do now because of what Derek did for me years ago. And 5Y5 is the bookend of the end of independent bottling. Port cask, heavy char, 5 and a bit years, nearly 6 years old, 56%. This one's a bit higher than the others that are 54.
Wow.
Big port cask, beautiful color, stunning color.
I don't know if you're getting this at home, but for me, underneath all that port and obviously the sort of the cherries and the dark characters, there's like a honeydew melon or something really sweet. Not bee honey, but some other sort of sweet honey melon vibes coming through. It's quite distinct and really nice palate.
It's so Burnsy makes a very clean spirit. Uses one malt and very, very focused on making a clean spirit. So a very Scotch style spirit. And a port cask, this is quite traditional, what I went into. And I laid a port cask, a Chardonnay cask, a sherry cask, and a Pinot Noir cask all at the same time, on a bourbon cask. And they've all been released, previous releases, but this one, port, is much, in my experience, port casks are harder to work with. They take more time. They fight with you. Whereas the sherry casks, you know what a sherry cask is going to do, and it does what it's meant to do. Whereas port, it puts up a fight. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Got a few comments here. So just finishing out the last chat. So Barossa Valley Brewing doing an AI beer. Macromar is doing an intelligent AI whiskey. So they'll be cool. The Swedish one, yeah?
Yeah, that's the Swedish one.
Yep. But tasting this whiskey, Jan says I've tasted seaweed. So,
yeah, okay, seaweed. So there's an earthiness there. Is that what we're getting? Seaweed.
So a few questions coming in.
That could actually be the char. It definitely could be the char because it was a very heavy char on this. And char can give you anything from charcoal through to chocolate, through to an earthiness. So yeah, I can sort of connect the dots to seaweed.
So these next questions all sort of related. So Dave says, is it an MVG cask? Michael asks what size cask. Scott asks same thing, cask size, and then age statement. So that the 5 represents 5 years. That's the obvious part for me. But yeah, tell us about the cask.
Okay, so the cask, this is fairly traditional. So this is Tassie, Tassie Cask Company. So they're Coopera down in Bridgewood, just out of Hobart. I've used Tassie Cask Company casks when I first started. I don't tend to use them now. I specified a very heavy char on the barrel. The char levels I deal with now are less than what that one was. And it was a 100-litre barrel. So it probably would have been originally a 225 and then broken down into a smaller format 100-litre barrel.
Sorry, you meant PVG, as in Peter Van Gant from Mudgee. Is it one of his barrels? He's ports?
No. This one is it's a port cask from Tasmania. Where the actual port came from, I don't know. But it was a Tasmania, so they would have sourced from a winery, either local or on the mainland. But no, this is not a Peter Van Gant cask, which is a Mudgee region cask. So I have very much a close collaboration with Peter Van Gant winery, which I'll talk about shortly.
Yeah, cool. Scott's getting a little white pepper and spice on the finish. So yeah, I get that. That's cool.
What do you think of the mouthfeel?
It's very viscous. Ben actually just wrote it takes water very well. So yeah, if you got a bit of water at home, add a couple of drops if you want to just mix it up. Whilst we're doing that, so Crafty, a lot of distilleries, you've had a dream. It takes time. You got to get your license and ATO. You got to get your stills designed. Some distillers will go into production of non-whiskey products like your gins and vodkas for cash flow to get it out the door. You chose to do independent bottling to kind of get started, but both on getting product out the door, but also as a learning. So when you were ready to distill, right, you actually had a few years under the belt, right?
Correct. Yeah. So I started in 2015. So I'll come back a step. It actually started in 2014. I went to Tasmania. It was my 50th birthday, and I went to toured around a couple of Tassie distillers. And it was, for me, it was a revelation, because prior to that, I always thought of big Scottish distilleries. So I had no comprehension that, I could actually have a crack at this myself. It was Overeem. That was the one that, for me, when I visited them in suburban Hobart, and I walked in and I went, wow, this is a small garden shed, and there's 2 stills in here, and they're making whiskey. Whoa, okay, now I'm excited. Pardon me. So what happened is I came back from that and I thought, how do I do this? I want to make whiskey. And from sort of 2008, 2009, I was fascinated by whiskey. I started learning. I started doing courses. I started hanging around distillers, asking questions and building my own knowledge, and surrounded myself with what I call mentors, people in the industry who are good friends of mine. And it was great. It was fantastic. Then I convinced my wife, okay, I want to make some whiskey. And she goes, why? And I explained it to her and said, I think we can make some money. We could do a cask of whiskey. We can make some money. And because I said that, she said, okay, let's do it and give it a go. I then founded a distillery. Full disclosure, it was Archie Rose. And I approached him, and I knew Dave Withers from the Oak Barrel, and he'd just started at Archie Rose. And I said, mate, I really, really want to just get some spirit and put it in a barrel. Can you help me? He talked to the owner, Will Edwards, who said, yeah, we can do that. So I then got spirit. I then talked to a mate of mine, distiller Brian Hollingworth at Blackgate Distillery. And I said, mate, I really, really want to do this. Can you help me? And he goes, what do you want? And I said, I don't want to mature my barrel in Sydney. I really want to mature it out your way. Do you know where I could store it? And he went, what, my place? And I went, okay. 10 barrels later, he kicks me out. 10 barrels later, he goes, Crafty, you're taking over. That's it. You're out of here. And I was. And I found my own shed. And at that stage, everything was still part-time. Right. It was very much my passion, very much part-time. And then I thought, no, this is what I want to do. I really want to do this. I want to have a crack at it. I want to mill. I want to brew. I want to distill. I want to blend. I want to do all this. And work was getting to a point where I'd worked for one company for 33 years in 4 countries in technical, commercial, and sales roles. And I thought, and it was the printing industry. And my company, the engine room of the company was newspapers and magazines, and we all know what happened there. So my division was food packaging, which was doing really well. But it was like, no, it's time to change. So I made the jump and then walked into New South Wales fires. So that wasn't very good for the business. When I finally had a cellar door, followed by this little thing called COVID, followed by I'm in the back of a pub and all my cellar door trade comes via the pub, and the pub shut down, and then COVID lockdown, and it's just been one thing after the next until now, economic downturn. So yeah, thank you very much for that one.
Mate, it's the endurance. Whiskey is crafted under pressure, right?
Oh, you're not wrong. It's not just me, mate. There's a lot of distillers that have gone through that.
You've done well. We've got some comments coming through. Dave, who's obviously a massive fan because he's referenced the Black Soul Beast was epic. So there you go, wearing the shirt. I actually cracked my bottle at the Aussie Whiskey show and put up on the bar for people to try. And I gave Crafty some, and he was a little bit shocked. He wasn't expecting to see a bottle in the wild. So
you don't see that in the wild, no.
That's very cool. Scott's asking. We'll jump into the next stream in 1 minute. But last question, Crafty, what's the first whiskey you released that you distilled yourself?
That was I Am. So I Am for us was very cool, because what it was what's called a super cask format. So I worked very, very closely with a master cooper. He's a good mate of mine and a mentor. And we worked very, very closely on char and toast levels and that. So anyway, we had this barrel. I loved it. It was my 4-grain mash bill. And one of the grains, one of the barleys, is actually malted to my specification. And it's called Crafty Special Roast, which is very, very cool. I talked to my friends in Scotland about it. I've got my own barley that's malted to my spec. And they go, how the fuck do you get that? Because they can't get that in Scotland. Right? And that's cool. That's cool. So I Am our first release. Pretty straightforward, actually. It was a super cask, and it was a Peter Van Gent, which is a Mudgee winery vintage port cask. And I filled that barrel uncharred. And that barrel had a particular cough medicine taste for a number of years, which was intriguing. And by combining the two, we released it as I Am. And we did really well. We picked up a silver medal in Tokyo Whiskey and Spirits comp, and we picked up a bronze in London Spirits comp for that, which was like, wow. And that was our first whiskey, 100% Craft Works, mill brewed, distilled, local water, local, everything. And yeah, that's I Am. So in fact, just on I Am, we did I Am 2, we did Son of a Beast, we did Time and Wages Bumblebee, one other I can't remember, All Power 2, and they're all what I call the I Am flavor profile. We're now establishing I Am as a brand, an ongoing brand, and we're about to pull down 7 casks and bottle potentially 1,200, maybe more bottles. Sort of mid-50s think. We're still finalizing all that, but I Am will be an ongoing thing for us. And then there's another 2 recipes that we're working on.
Very cool. Michael, we'll get to your question in a minute. Let's start on whiskey number 5, Rebel, 54.3%.
Yeah, Rebel's really, really special. Oh, actually, hang on. Before we do, I forgot to mention the back label on 5Y. So remember how I said it was emotional? Last year, a musician called Maxi Jazz passed away. And Maxi Jazz is from a band called Faithless. And it really hit me hard. Like, I knew the guy and I didn't, right? But it felt that way. And I felt like I needed to do something because music's really important to me. And so I did. So on the back label, it says tribute to Maxi Jazz, God is a DJ, which was one of his tracks. And that's an imagery of himself and then me playing around with AI text art generation. So yeah, maybe I'll get a phone call from Faithless saying copyright infringement, but by then it'll all be sold.
Well, you're going to be summoned to the New York courts. But on that note, because you're very much clearly a rebel, tell us about this release.
Rebel. Why is it called Rebel? Okay, this was very, very cool. This one is the oldest whiskey. This is 6 years old. This one is independent bottling. It's part of the Ages series. This one was the hardest whiskey for me to make, in the sense of it didn't do what it was meant to do. It's a rum cask. So I got a rum cask. So I contacted a distiller called Spike Desert. And Spike was part of the modern day distillers, the last 30-year generation distillers. So Bill Lark, Patrick Maguire, Spike. He's in that category, right? So I ring Spike, he's an angry American. And I say, Spike, I'd love a rum cask. And he goes, because he makes rum. And he goes, what do you want that for? And I go, because I want to make some whiskey. Can I get a cask off you? And he goes, no, we cut them in half and we sell them as flower pots. And I go, okay, can I buy 2 flower pots, but don't cut it in half? Because I did that and he laughed, he went, all right, Crafty, all right, yep, okay, you can have it. So I was super excited. I was going to have my first ever rum cask. Then it turns out it's going to cost me like $1,500 to get it because it's out in Kununurra and WA, middle of nowhere. So I rang up Spike and I go, mate, I can't do it. I'd love to do it, but I can't. And he goes, all right, I'm a pumpkin farmer as well. I'll throw it on the back of the pumpkin truck, which is going down to Adelaide. But it's going to cost you a bottle of rum and I want a bottle of whiskey. I was like, yeah, cool. Bottle of rum for the driver and bottle of whiskey for you, Spike. Awesome, no problem. Anyway, year 2, Spike goes, where's my whiskey? And I go, mate, it's still maturing. Year 3, where's my whiskey? Still maturing. Year 4, where's my whiskey? Still maturing. It's not ready, right? It took 6 years. It would not do what it was meant to do as a rum cask. And it drove me nuts. At 5 years, I was seriously considering pulling it out of wood and going, but if I pull it out of rum, if I don't put it into another rum cask, then it's not a rum cask. What is it? I thought I could redistill it. And I thought, no, that doesn't work. I don't want to do that. So what I ended up doing is applying a winemaker's technique, which is also a home distiller's technique. So I took a sample from the barrel and I put it into bottles and I added specially toasted and charred wooden blocks. They're toasted and charred to a certain spec. I tasted it in the bottles and got an idea of how it was pushing flavor. And what I wanted was a lot of vanilla. It pushed vanilla into it hard, and then the rum notes started coming out. So then I replicated that in the barrel with large blocks. And bam, it came alive. Bam, it pulled in vanilla, and then bam, up came the rum notes. It's still a soft rum cask, but it was all there. So that's a pretty unconventional way. I'm a very transparent person. We don't have to follow the Scotch in what we do things. And to me, that was a very interesting approach to moving whiskey flavors. And it's still an approach which is in my box of tricks for the future. Spike passed away. And just recently we had the Australian Distillers Association conference, and his daughter, Kaylin, was at the conference, and I proudly gave her a bottle of Rebel. And part of the reason it's called Rebel is because it was a pain in the ass. It didn't do what it was meant to do, but it was also Spike. Spike was the ultimate rebel. So cheers to Spike.
Here's the Spike. So Dave actually called it out. Spike started Hoochery Distillery in far north WA. So
correct.
Yeah, if you like your rums or you want a nice sipping rum, this isn't Bundaberg rum. This is probably one of the best sipping rums. Big 60% monster. It's delicious. It's up there. Few questions. The first obvious one: what wood chips did you use?
So it was a company that supplies into the wine industry called Sheen. And they visited me and they gave me tastes of spirits with different wood. So there's different charring levels and different toasting levels and different woods, French oak, American oak. So it was actually a bit of French oak and from memory, there was some American oak. I played around with a couple of things, but it was incredible how quickly it moved the flavor. It just pulled it. So previously to that, it had a real Chinese takeaway thing going on. It was real just umami and just savory and it didn't have any sweetness. I think it's a really interesting whiskey now. It's got a lot of complexity and real rich flavor. Is it rum cask? It's definitely got some rummy notes in there, but it's not front and center by any means.
Which I think I kind of agree with Tommy. I don't normally like rum cask, but I like this one. So there you go. Michael, you've been very patient. I know. Michael asks, why did you make the decision to mill and brew and distill?
Really, really, really good question. Okay. I'm going to get myself in trouble. Where do I start? All right. We'll start this way. Sutherland's Cove, right? Sutherland's Cove makes one of the best, well, they won World's Best Whiskey in 2014. I actually visited them the day that they won, right? It was incredible and awesome. And they were bringing in beer wash from Cascade. And to this day, they still bring in wash. So they don't actually mill brew themselves. They distill, right? They don't try to hide it, right? And there's nothing to hide. It's just a way of making whiskey. There's a sizable percentage of distillers in Australia, predominantly Tasmania, that source their beer from breweries, and they choose to do that. Some, like, for example, Bill McHenry Distillery started with wash and now brews. In fact, he brews his own beer. I saw they released the pale ale, which is very, very cool. So I started as sourcing wash. But what I did is I went to a brewery and I said, I want you to make my whiskey wash, a very small one. And they said, what's whiskey wash? And I told them, and they said, okay, that's new for us. And I said, I want to brew something like a stout. And they go, okay, well, here's our stout recipe. So we looked at it and I went, okay, well, I don't want oats, so I'll pull the oats out and play around with it, blah, 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 blah. Within about 2 months, I swapped the recipe over and was using Voyager Craft malt, which is the barley they weren't using, but it's the barley I wanted to use because I knew those boys well. I then started playing around with yeast. And after about 6 months, they said, yeah, new owners, they said, no, we don't want to make this. So I was like, fine, I'd like to make it myself anyway. Brewing is where the magic happens. Okay. Brewing, there's so many flavor levers you can play with, whether it's the length of your ferment, whether it's how long, the type of yeast you use. Do you use one? Do you use two? Do you co-pitch? Do you do them separately? What else? I'm trying to think now. If you open top ferment, I open top ferment, or you close top ferment. What barley you're using, how you're milling your barley. There's so many things you can play with that impact flavor directly. When you get it into the still, absolutely that has a huge contribution to flavor. But what you're doing in distillation is concentrating. You're not destroying, you're concentrating. So you build huge flavor complexity in a wash and take it into a still, and you're doing all that. You've just got more levers to play with. So I'll give you an example. So IAM is very what we call roasted malt forward. So it's base malts, and then it's roasted malts, which is your chocolate malts and that. And it gives you a really heavy, dark style of wash. I have another one, which right now is called, releasing it in July, it's called Smoke Juice. And what it is 100% smoked malt. And that is wood shavings from a cooperage floor. They use it to smoke meat, and I used it to smoke malt. So we've got this whiskey, which is sweet and light campfire. And when you brew it, it's all bacon and biscuits and smoke. It's wonderful. So that's going to be a second flavor profile. So we're doing a release in July, but we won't be able to release any more for about 3-4 years after that. And then there's a third one, which is called, so I am, then the smoke one is we are, and then the third one is called you are. So I am, you are, we are, Australia. You are is what I call my Blanc style. And that is roasted malts, no. Well, some. But I'm trying to emulate the wine casks of Brook Laddie, the wonder of Waterford. It's that lighter, expressive, very spirit forward, very fruity, very clean, not complexity, coming from dark roasted malts. So that's a long answer. Ferments are so important. You talk to distillers who ferment, do their own brews, they wouldn't do it any other way.
It's the true definition of craft.
Yeah, it is.
Just for added context, so when Scotch, debatable whether the Scotch or Irish did it first, but they all did it, locally, and they used whatever barley was available in the 1200s, 1600s, like mass-produced barley, which was basically farmed to produce the highest sugar yields, because that turns into the highest alcohol yields, is a modern day, last 100 years, 200 years max sort of invention by the modern Scotch industry. So you have all these amazing flavors with hundreds of different types of barley have basically been bred out of existence in the Scotch and Irish industry, because they like, the Scotch like economies of scale. So let's mass produce it. Let's pick the barley that's most weather resistant, that doesn't get eaten by the bugs or the birds, won't get ruined by snow randomly, all that fun stuff that can ruin a crop because they don't want to waste it. Then turn it into the highest sugar yield ratio, but you lose the biggest barley growers in the world. We have sort of been untouched as an industry. Ukraine, similar actually, that they make a lot of barley that the Scotch industry imports. You mentioned Waterford, so Jim McEwen, Mark Rayner, they decided, let's start growing heritage barleys. Let's go to the barley universities and play around with it. Mark Rayner's now left. He's now at Waterford in Ireland, and he's doing single farm bottling, so different barley grown at different farms. Crafty is working with Voyager Malts. And Voyager Malts is this amazing barley farm where they are doing different barleys grown on this giant property. Go out there, they've turned it into a bit of a tourist center next door. So they've got a little lake there, they've got cabins, they've got a tasting house, amazing steaks. Go check out Voyager Malts. But yeah, Crafty can go in and go, hey, I would like a particular barley strain or multiples, and they will grow him a field of barley purely for Crafty, and he'll be the only distillery in the world using that particular barley, because that's how unique barley can be, and you can extract hopefully I summed it up right, Crafty.
No, you did. I'll add to what you said. What Ollie was saying about it's been selective breeding over time, and it's basically pushing it towards high starch content, which translates to high alcohol content, so high yield, right? But flavor's been bred out, right? And this is part of the reasons why the Scotch-centric marketing is 80% of the flavor comes from the barrel, don't worry about the barley, right? The fact of the matter is, in Australia, a lot of brewers are using, distillers, I should say, or brewers, are using brewers' barley. And brewers' barley is much more flavoursome than distillers' barley, number one. Number two, there's grain varieties that have been resurrected after 30, 40, 50 years. These were grains that had huge flavour but poor yields, right? I did an event, when was it, 2 weeks ago? And it was myself and two craft distillers, and we showcased an Irish distillery called Waterford Distillery, which is the most progressive distillery on the planet, in my opinion. These guys are unbelievable what they're doing, resurrecting old grains, total focus on flavor, chasing flavor. And yeah, I'm part of that global movement. It's called the Whisky Terroir Project. I'm part of it. Side note, I'm growing barley, same variety as Voyager Craft Malt. We're actually getting the seed from Voyager Craft Malt and we're planting it locally. And so we will be able to compare the terroir of my local distillery to the terroir where they grow the barley and malt the barley in the Riverina. It'll be an exciting little experiment. And terroir and wine, we've heard of terroir and wine. Terroir and whiskey is an absolute real thing. Scientifically proven, by the way. But don't get me started.
Let's put a pause on it and jump into whiskey number 6, the GT.
GT.
So very quickly, the Rebel was your last IB and the GT is your distillate?
Correct. GT is 100% me, 100% me. So that's GT. That's GT. Why is it called GT?
Can you hold the bottle sideways so we get that color? For sideways on the other way. So yep.
Yeah.
look at that. That's black as.
That's 3 years old, right? That shows you the extraction power. And here, now where's my GT? Hold on. Gotta find that one. Don't want to open that one. Don't want to open that one. Sorry, I'm going through my bag of bottles. Okay, GT is really, really special. Really special.
Crafty's table is a stack of Voyager malt bags of barley, by the way. He's very yeah. His setup is in a barrel.
And my computer's sitting on a barrel. No, it's not. It's actually sitting on two things you don't want to know about. So, okay, GT, super special. Why is it special? Because whiskey is a time capsule. That's the best way to describe it. So when you're drinking something now, this is 3 years ago, right? This is when 3 years ago is when we put it in the barrel, and it's 3 years ago where my recipe was. So it is a time capsule. But 3 years ago, made a decision, and the decision was, again, working with my Cooperer mate, Master Cooperer mentor, Youngie. I said, mate, can we start to play around with toasting and charring? Because as I was going along on my journey, and still am, learning about wood, learning about interaction of spirit with wood, learning about, holy crap, toasting and charring does make a huge difference, right? You don't want to just burn the crap out of the barrel, which is very much an American bourbon style approach to wood. And I went, let's do an experiment. So we did. We took a super cask, which is an extra as cask seasoned with Oloroso Spanish sherry, which is very much a Youngie format. We took another barrel, did exactly the same, but we played with the toast and char. We laid the barrels side by side. We put it on the shelf. I tasted it 1, 2, and 3 years. At 3 years, I went, this is it. This is the direction I want to go. So this is Craft Works mash bill. I am mash bill. So 4 malts, big slug of Crafty special roast in this one. Over time, I've amped that up and I've wound chocolate back. So when I first started in the I am profile, the chocolate notes were bang in the front. Everything was in the front, whereas now the chocolate is in the back. That's me playing around with the mash bill. Fantastic, if I say so myself, fantastic whiskey. I love it. It's doing everything that I want, and this is the direction, the future, and this is where we're going with the I am profile. I believe you build complexity in a new make spirit. You don't let the barrel do all the heavy lifting, right, of flavor. You build complexity. If you build complexity and you go into good barrels, you will make good whiskey, right? If you have an ordinary new make and you go into good barrels, you'll have an ordinary whiskey. And if you have great spirit and you go into ordinary barrel, you'll have ordinary whiskey. So wood is very important, getting high quality wood. So what I'm looking for is complexity. I'm looking for, as I said before, to me, the building blocks are aromatics and length of flavor. And when I'm on the bench playing around and blending them all, which is what I learned through independent bottling, that's what I want. I want bigger aromatics and length. If I don't get those two, I keep going until I get those two. And then I start looking at the palate, the mid palate, the back palate, the texture of it. So this is 57 from memory. Sorry, I got so many right now. I'm 56.5, close. So it's quite a big whiskey, but it does not drink like a 56.5. This drinks like a low 50.
Very creamy.
Very creamy. Yep. And a big part of that is what's behind me. The still. I've got a short, dumpy still. And it makes a very oily forward whiskey. That's what I want. And my cuts on my whiskey are quite wide. So I'm pulling in lots of oils and fats, and which helps with texture and just deep, rich flavors. That's what I'm looking for.
I thought it was because you built it to fit in the shed.
The roof's a bit low. No, that's not the reason actually. But you see the cone on it, the boil ball, right? Onion, whatever you want to call it. I got that because it was pretty. That was it. That was honestly it. Okay, so there's a nutty characteristic. The nutty characteristic is very much a signature of Craft Works, is very much a signature of that, but also the grain, the barley. So this does speak of the barley. So what's your comments on it? Any questions, feedback?
Yeah, some comments coming through.
Doesn't matter.
So Scott says he's actually letting those empty glasses rest open and getting some very interesting notes on all of them now. But good nose on the GT. Ben says yum. Enough said. Owen and Lindsay both say so good to try again. Should have picked it up the Aussie show. You might be able to grab one tonight. And Dave says pretty short line arm as well. There you go.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So I'm pushing it hard. I'm not doing light and fruity styles. And so I run my still flat out. It is a short line arm. And it's also the angle of the line arm is not, it is conducive to heavier spirits. But to give you some idea, so when you're doing the distillation run, if you have a really clean spirit, okay, very, very clean spirit, it may start in the hearts run, it may start around about 70, 72, something like that. And as the still continues to run, it'll go down to say 65, maybe 64, 63, and stop. And that part is the hearts. It's very, very clean, very ethanol forward, right? And take that away and put it in a barrel. My cuts, and a lot of distillers don't talk about cuts, and some do because they see it as proprietary information. I just see it as part of the overall equation of making whiskey, and I don't mind sharing it. I take really wide cuts. So I generally first cut at 75, and I'll go as deep as 60. I've gone deeper. I've gone down to 58, which is very deep. Now, what that means is as you go further down into your hearts run, you lose the fruitiness and you start to get an earthiness coming through. The challenge that I have is if you miss the cut, you can go from something that's tasty to dirt and wet cardboard very, very easily, right? And you talk to distillers about wet cardboard and they go, yeah, faints, don't want to know about it, right? Chocolate as a grain, as a barley, really comes into its own in the early 60s. So it's a very fine line between the chocolate, pulling those chocolatey notes and pulling dirt cardboard. That's pretty transparent, guys.
I've actually spent a bit of time down in the shed, and Crafty's up sometimes at 3 a.m. checking those heart runs, like he's babysitting the still 24/7. on those days, and he's working very hard to make sure he doesn't miss his mark. I don't know if we lost you.
Yeah.
Oh, you're back.
No, I'm here. Have
I
you got
just-
me?
Yeah, you're back. I don't know what you heard, but got a question from Dave saying, what ABV do you put your new make in the barrel?
Good question. So it used to be around about 64.5. And then one day I went, why am I doing it 64.5? And it's go, well, that's what they do in Scotland. And go, yeah, but why am I doing it at 64.5? And I started to question it, and I started to do my research, and it was more research in America, what they used to do in America. And so as a consequence of that, I've been coming down in ABV, and now I'm sort of around 60. I
think we've lost him again. Whilst we're waiting for Crafty, so Scott has given his pet parrot a sniff of his whiskey.
At this stage, there are distillers into though, low in a very environment.
Sorry, Crafty, we heard you said 60 and then it cut out, so we don't know what the answer was.
Yes, yeah, so it's 60, basically 60, 61. That's where I'm at right now.
Awesome.
Still learning all the time, guys.
I think it's cool that you're always optimizing, innovating, you're pushing boundaries, you're taking your learnings and completing those iteration loops basically to keep getting better.
Well, for me right now, my focus is yeast, because yeast and flavor generation is next level stuff. And I'm very much focused on an approach like Westland Distillery in the US, where they'll use a combination of yeast and particularly Saison yeast, which generates some very interesting flavor compounds. So I've been experimenting with that for the last year and a half.
Very cool. Well, I might start the poll whilst we're voting. Pour yourself whiskey number 7 if you haven't already, the mystery dram.
Yum.
I don't know if it's a mystery for everyone at home, because I have a feeling the label maker, even though I said put mystery on it, he might have actually put what whiskey was. Yes, exactly. I had a feeling.
What is it?
So can someone put it into the chat? What's it? Riverbourne Objective. There you go.
It is the Objective. I thought it was. All right. So.
Well, let me tell you a very quick story. So Crafty, we organized this tasting. We had to delay it a couple of times. And then, when Crafty finally came to drop off the bottles, he'd just come back from Riverbourne. And he's like, can you just sneak this in to the tasting? Because he's we all know Marty is a good mate, and just don't tell anyone. So little gift from Crafty is a little thanks. Thank you, Crafty, for sharing the love. It's nice to actually, I know you work with other distilleries for your own IB and stuff, but thank you for sharing the New South Wales love.
It's fine, mate. It's absolute pleasure. So Marty is a good friend of mine. Marty is one of the oldest distillers in Australia. Marty is the closest to pure craft in Australia. That'd be the way I'd describe it. Okay. He's 78, gets in his shed, puts on his Pavarotti loud, and he just wants to make his whiskey. And over the years, and I've known Marty for, how long? 6, 7 years now. He is got better and better and better and better at making his whiskey. He experiments. He's trying to make a lighter style. He's trying to focus more on the Japanese style. He's playing around with yeast. He's playing around with barley. He's playing around with barrels, and he's just doing his own thing. And his distillery is in the
Really testing the Capertee wireless today.
Out I don't know, 900 meters sea level, great, just have fun. Mudgee is the best thing I think you've ever made. So what it is, it's a combination of peated and unpeated barley. It is beautifully balanced. It is beautifully paired.
Ah, there we go. We've lost him. Well, I'm glad that happened towards the end of the night and not at the beginning. We'll give Crafty a couple minutes to come back. But yeah, what do people think of the Riverbourne? All right, here he is. He's coming back. Put your comments back in. Let me just unmute you, Crafty. You back?
Sorry, mate. Sorry, my mistake. Yeah. It's just awesome. And so Marty and I collaborate. So now I'm out of independent bottling. I'm now moving into just focusing on what I make, but also collaborating with other distillers. Right? I collaborated with Corowa. I've collaborated with Marty in Riverbourne, and we've got a series called The Vatman, and we've got one coming out later in the year called Vatman Rising. And it's him, it's his spirit and my spirit combined. So it's very much like what Blackgate and Florio Distillery have been doing with Country to Coast, and which is cool, really, really cool. So what do you think of it?
The Jan says yum. Michael says just enough peat to give it a different flavor. So I really like it. I've tried a few of Marty's peated ones, and I agree with Crafty. This is probably my favorite peated release of his. It's maturing into its own sort of peat.
He's got his signature DNA all the way through it. All his whiskies have that DNA, which I love because he's not about barrels doing all the heavy lifting. So he uses a lot of barrels which have been heavily shaved, toasted and recharred, lighter style barrels. He's done some bourbon barrels in that. But yeah, guys, if you can hunt down Marty, if you're down Canberra way, definitely look him up. He's about an hour from Canberra, and just making some very cool whiskey.
Yeah, very, very cool. Thank you for sharing that dram with us. I might share the poll results because only Crafty and I can actually see the results. But yeah, we've hit stop there, and here we go.
Man, what was wrong with Capertee?
Oh, it's a tough question. Favorite two drams of the night. So it just didn't hit the brief. It might be people's thirds. I don't know what people's comments are in the chat, but
that's good. That's actually, hang on, 2 sheds, Billy. Yeah, see what I say? See, Billy appeals more than 2 sheds. Five way, yeah, 5 ways up there. That's cool. Yeah, Rebel. Yeah, Rebel's a challenging whiskey for sure. It's some people love it, and some people hate it. And GT, wow, thanks guys. Glad you like GT. Thing I like about GT is I meet people that have bad experiences with whiskey, and they taste things like GT and they just light up because they go, this is not what I thought whiskey was about. And newbies. I'll tell you a story, just a quick one, because I loved it. I was at a market 2 weeks ago. A kid comes up, 18, shows me his ID. Yep, cool. And he goes, I've just started drinking with my dad. I went, oh, cool. What are you drinking? Oh, Johnny Walker. Cool. You enjoy it? Yeah, I'm loving it. I go, would you like to try something? Yep. So I pour it and he shots it, right? And I go, yep, cool, okay. And he goes, can I try something else? I went, yeah. So I give him another one. He shots it. And I go, can I say something to you? And I said, and I'm not being critical. Do not take this as criticism, right? This is me imparting some of my own personal experience. So when I started drinking whiskey, someone showed me how to drink whiskey, how to appreciate whiskey. And he goes, oh, yeah. And I said, okay, first thing, right, I'll pour it and don't drink it. And he goes, yeah. And he goes, right, now just nose it, but don't bring it right up to your nose. Don't burn your nostrils. Just wave it around your nose gently. So he did, and he started to light up. He started to go, oh, I can smell things. And I went, yeah. He goes, oh, I'm getting all these different notes. I went, yeah. I go, right, okay, now bring it to your mouth, right? And just wee sip. And he goes, yep. And I go, now forget about that. All you've done is just recalibrated, right? Don't worry about it. He goes, oh, okay. Now take another sip. Oh, yep. Okay, enjoy that. Yep. Okay, now go back to nosing. Now you've been doing it with your mouth closed. Now do it with your mouth open. Oh, wow, that's totally different. He got super, super excited, right? Super excited. He was on the start of his whiskey journey. And from my standpoint, there was no arrogance. There was no telling anyone granny how to suck eggs. It was purely, I could see he was excited about whiskey and he just needed a couple of tips to put him on his journey and explore further. So he's super excited. He wanted to go back to his dad and drink something other than Johnny Walker. And he said, oh, I'll come back with my dad. We'll buy a bottle and can you show my dad and that. To me, that's what whiskey's about, guys.
Very, very cool. All right. Well, I think that formally closes the formalities of tonight. 7 wonderful drams, a whole mix of the completion of Crafty's IB journey, now 100% making it yourself end to end, and yeah, looking forward to the future, mate. Yeah, and I've been doing it a number of years, making it myself, and got some very interesting stuff coming down the pipe, that's for sure. Awesome. Well, I might hit pause on the recording, but if anyone wants to hang around, ask any questions, please stick on. Crafty, you got a few more minutes, hopefully. Otherwise, I will bid everyone good night. We've got a whole bunch of new tastings, virtuals, in-persons, all going live on the site tonight. So jump on our website if there's anything of interest there. There's always something cool. We'll send out emails and whatnot as well. So till the next tasting, thank you all. And yeah, feel free to hang around. Ollie, just a quick one before you go. Can I say something? Go for it. So if you guys are interested in hearing more about Australian distillers, because it is an exciting story, right? So a few years ago, I created a podcast called Aussie Craft Distillers Shooting the Shit. And the reason I did it was during COVID. And it was because the big guys were interviewing Australian distillers and they were asking questions like, so who are you? Where are you from? What do you make? What's your ABV? And it was as boring as batshit. And I said, we could do this ourselves. We could just talk to fellow distillers and have some fun. So we did. So we created Aussie Craft Distillers Shooting the Shit. And Ollie, if you could put a note up on the website on that, that'd be awesome, mate. So what it is, we're up to episode 51, and we talk to distillers and people in the industry, both locally but also internationally. It's fun, it's lighthearted, it's unscripted, and it is. There you go. Scott's got it on his podcast app. That's it, Scott. That's it, mate. That's it. And we've got some crackers. We've got David Vitelli from Starwood coming up. We've interviewed Cam Symes, Bill Lark, Ian Smith from Tin Shed, Westland in the US, Waterford in Ireland. We're probably going to do Brook Laddie in the future. And it's all storytelling. It's technical. So some of it's serious about, and not just whiskey, spirits, I should say. So if you want to hear more, seriously, get on the podcast or YouTube. We've got a YouTube channel. If you feel like looking at my ugly mug for a period of time, you're more than welcome. And we have a lot of fun. A lot of fun. I enjoyed my session last year, Crafty. So maybe get re-invited one day. I'm sure a lot of you now lining up. No, I lost you again. Why am I losing you? You need to get Starlink out there. Yeah, well, I am on Starlink, believe it or not. Okay. I'm just in my shed. It's a faraway cage or whatever you call it. Anyway, all right, that's my little plug on shooting. Awesome. I will hit the pause on the recording. Feel free to hang around. Crafty, thanks again for tonight. Thank you all for joining, and we'll see you at the next tasting.